Kapowitz.
Okay, so for everyone watching on video, my apologies. I forgot to hit record at the beginning. We just saw the introduction of the Ramban to Sefer Bamidbar, and we're in the midst of his very famous theory that tells us that basically the Mishkan is made to parallel Har Sinai. And I think we've seen this previously, right, with the whole debate about was the commandment to build the Mishkan given before or after the Chet HaEgel, before or after the sin of the golden calf? The Ramban says it was given before, and this was always meant to somehow embody and perpetuate the experience of Har Sinai so that the Jews would always have access or symbolic access to it. He goes on here to say that the entire opening of Sefer Bamidbar, which tells us how the camp was set up and where each tribe was situated, is in order to set up the same parallel structure. That just as the Bnei Israel at Har Sinai set up their camp surrounding the mountain, and there were very strict borders, and only certain people could cross the borders, so too the camp and the way that it was set up with the tribes on the outside, the Levium on the inside, and then the Kohanim and the Levium who carried everything more inside. Very, very similar structure. And so he says that the entire purpose of at least the Torah's description of the setting up of the camp, which he sees as one of, if not the central motive of motif of Sefer Bamidbar, is to show us that there's this parallel, and that the Jewish camp traveling through the desert was meant to re-embody and reenact and re-experience what they went through at Har Sinai and carry that with them throughout their journeys. Right, and then one could say by extension, and again, this gets into what we saw earlier about how he says that it's everything is mitzvah l'shaud, is temporary, right? So the Beis Hamikdash in Israel was also sort of a similar thing, that at the center of where the whole nation settled was this one central location where they would all come to worship. So that's the Ramban. The Rashbam, I think, is a lot more practical, and he tells us the very beginning of Sefer Bamidbar, Seuet Rosh Kol Adat, right, we're given the first mitzvah for the census to count the nation. Lefi shemei ata tzrichim lavo la'eretz Yisrael u'bnei esrim ru'im latzeit b'tzava hamilchama harei be'esrim b'chodesh. Okay, since they're about to enter the land of Israel, and everyone aged 20 and above is fit for drafting into the army. So we take a census in order to prepare and to know what the army is going to look like, as we'll see in a couple of minutes. But again, the plan is we're supposed to go straight. We leave Har Sinai. We're supposed to go straight to Eretz Yisrael now. We're supposed to go straight to the land of Israel. And so in order to do that, we have to set up the army. And he says that that's the purpose, at least of the first half of Sefer Bamidbar, before things go awry. The Abarbanel, we're going to start in the middle. Ba HaSefer HaRevi'i. So the fourth book, right? He also tells us in his introduction, just like the Medrash that we saw already, the very broad stroke overview of each Sefer of Chumash. Ba HaSefer HaRevi'i L'Saper Seder Hanhagat Ha'am. So the purpose of the fourth book is to tell us how to lead the nation. Echaya b'midbar b'maseim v'chaniyatam v'kol hatzla'a shemetzatam b'derech. Their travels, their campments, their complaints on the way. Hasiba asher ba'avura nitzakvu b'midbar mem shana, and the reason why they were forced to stay in the desert for 40 years. Tom kol hador yotzim mimitzrayim, until that entire generation who left Egypt died out. Asher ira Korach va'adato, what happened to Korach and his companions, etc., etc. He basically says that the point of, or the major theme of Sefer Bamidbar is that of leadership of the nation. Okay, so those are a few of the classical explanations of what this book is all about. I want to look at a fourth and maybe a fifth, depending on how we're going to count, idea. And for that, we'll
You
go
just
back.
summarize a Barbanel again.
He says it's about leadership. And this is just a very short excerpt from it, but it's about leadership. Okay. To begin, let's actually let's go to number 6 first. So this is Rav Moshe Lichtenstein summarizing Rabbi Yoel ben Nun, two teachers at Yeshivat Har Etzion. Rav Moshe Lichtenstein, the son of Rav Aaron, is one of the Rosh Yeshiva there now. So he says he heard from Rav Yoel ben Nun that the books of Vayikra and Bamidbar constitute two parallel continuations of the book of Shmot, and that the difference between them is well presented in the closing verse of the book of Shmot. Let's go to the closing verses of the book of Shmot, back to number 3. The cloud of glory covered the tent, and God's glory filled the Mishkan. Moshe could not enter into the tent because God's presence dwelled on it, and the glory of God filled the Mishkan. When the cloud lifted from the Mishkan, the children of Israel would travel. They would follow after where the cloud led them. And if it did not lift, then they would not travel until it did lift. Because the cloud of God was on the Mishkan and there was fire at night. To the eyes of all of Israel during all of their journeys. Back to Rav Yoel ben Nun. This passage, the final passage of Sefer Shmot, describes two types of clouds. The cloud of the Mishkan, which represents the Shekhinah, and the cloud of the journeys, which symbolizes the progress of the people of Israel through the wilderness. The book of Vayikra continues the first cloud, the cloud of the Mishkan, while the book of Bamidbar continues the second cloud, the cloud of the journeys. Okay, so we have Sefer Shmot, we have the book of Shmot, and then there's two branches, right? There's two natural things that have to ensue from Sefer Shmot, from the construction and completion of the Mishkan. Number one is what's going to happen in the Mishkan, the sacrifices, the worship, and that's Sefer Vayikra. So we have to address those issues, and we have to deal with what's the Mishkan going to do? How's it going to travel? Where's it going to go? And so that's Sefer Bamidbar. So we have two branches from Sefer Shmot. We've just finished Vayikra, and now we're going to deal with what's happening with the second cloud, the cloud of the journeys, the cloud of the traveling. That's what Sefer Bamidbar is going to be all about. And just to make this point a little bit stronger, I'm not sure it needs any strengthening, but it's also noted, right? My teacher, Rabbi Natty Helfgott, who says that from chapter 19 or 18 of Sefer Shmot, when Yitro comes and joins the nation, right? We're going to read this on Shavuos next week. When they come to the Midbar Sinai, they come to the desert of Sinai, to Mount Sinai, they have not moved. They have been in the same exact place, right? Since the middle of Sefer Shmot, all through the mitzvah of how to build the Mishkan, all through Sefer Vayikra, all through the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar, there has been no movement. Okay, we've been static. We've been in one place. And he says, as in the second paragraph here, as we open Sefer Bamidbar, we have another subtle shift in the emphasis. After Har Sinai of Shmot, in Ohel Moed Vayikra, right? Vayikra opens. It's number 4 on your source sheet. Vayikra Hashem el Moshe, Vaydaber elav me Ohel Moed lemor. God called to Moshe, he called him from the tent of meeting, from the Ohel Moed. So now, Sefer Bamidbar opens, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe b'midbar Sinai be'ohel Moed. God talks to Moshe in Midbar Sinai, in the desert of Sinai, in the tent of meeting. So we add to the location again. There's no movement, but we're emphasizing again. It's in the Midbar. It's in the desert. Um, and so that detail is added from the opening of Sefer Vayikra, in the opening of Sefer Bamidbar. Once again, this is not a geographic change, but the Torah has subtly shifted the emphasis in order to focus our attention on the fact that the Jewish people are now about to enter into a new phase in which they are traveling through their desert on the way to the promised land. Before this point, they had also been in Midbar Sinai, but in the context, firstly, of Har Sinai, and then the creation and dedication of Ohel Moed as a portable Sinai. The final and clearest proof of this is the verse in Parshat Maseh, which summarizes the route of the Jewish people. They traveled from Rephidim and camped at Midbar Sinai. They traveled from Midbar Sinai and camped at Kivot HaTa'ava. That's at the end of Sefer Bamidbar, but that tells us the travels, right? But that there hasn't been any travel from Midbar Sinai, from when they arrived to receive the Torah, until this point. This, in effect, covers all the parashiot from Shmot 19 until Bamidbar 11, including the entire book of Vayikra. So we've been very static, and the point of Sefer Bamidbar is that's about to change. Right? Not yet. We still have to set everything up, right? So we have 10 chapters in Sefer Bamidbar. What happens in the first 10 chapters? It's a little challenging, actually, to show. You asked how long it takes me to prepare the Parsha Shir. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so the beginning of Bamidbar, I have to admit, is a little bit challenging because nothing that exciting is happening, right? Bamidbar is the book of journeys. It's a book of a lot of, but all that happens in the second half, from chapter 10 onwards. The first 10 chapters, you have a census, you have setting up of the camp, you have a few random mitzvot that are interesting to talk about, but they're one-off, and I think we've spoken about most of them already in previous years. There's not much happening in the first 10 chapters of Sefer Bamidbar. The exciting stuff happens once we get to source number 8. Source number 8 is, right, this is chapter 10, the end of chapter 10, beginning of chapter 11, when they finally leave. The camp has been set up. They have the chatzotzrot, the trumpets. They're ready. Vaisume har Hashem derech shloshet yamim. V'aron brit Hashem noseh lifnehem derech shloshet yamim lator lahem menucha. They disembarked, they marched from the mountain of God for 3 days, a 3-day journey. And the Aron, the ark with the covenant of God, was in front of them for 3 days in order to seek out a resting place. Vayan Hashem ve'anan Hashem alehem yomam v'nasam min hamachaneh. And the cloud of God was over them during the day as they traveled away from this camp where they had been at. And then we have a pasuk which is very familiar to us because we sing it in shul every week. But you'll notice the punctuation. It's surrounded by these two inverted nuns. Vayhi bin soa ha'aron vayomer Moshe kuma Hashem vayafutz vayvecha v'yinusu misanecha mipanecha uvnucho yomar shuvah Hashem vivot alfei Yisrael. When the ark traveled, Moshe would say, "Arise, O God, and your enemies will flee from before you." And when it rested, he would say, "Shuva Hashem vivot alfei Yisrael," return, O God, to the myriads of Israel. I think I have to scroll down. And then we have Vayhi'am Kimit Onanim Ra Be'oznei Hashem. The nation started to complain. Then we have a whole series of complaints and sins, and things quickly fall apart. So there's a very famous idea. I first heard in the name of Rabbi Soloveitchik. I think it goes way before him. It's not unique to him, but where he says that the point of the inverted nuns here is to tell us that the Torah is setting up what should have been and what could have been. What should have been, what could have been, is that they are now on their journey and they're about to go from Mount Sinai Everything's been established. The camp is set up. They're about to go in the journey, however long it takes, a couple days, a couple weeks, to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel. And it gets interrupted by all of the complaints and all the sins and all the things that go wrong from chapter 10 onwards, right? And we don't need to go, but just think about the parshiot that we have, right? And it tells you some of these issues. We have Korach and his rebellion. We have Shlach, the incident of the spies. We have lots of things that go really bad. And so as a result, right, as a result of the spies, we have to spend 40 years wandering in the desert. The entire generation is not going to be allowed to enter the land. Um, and so Rabbi Helfgott says, again, this, very similar to what Rabbi Soloveitchik is attributed to saying. Um, in this way, Sefer Bamidbar is in many ways parallel to its counterpart in Sefer Shmot. The second book of the Torah contains with it the reality of lichatchila and b'di'evet. Right? Lichatchila, these are halachic terms. Lichatchila means the a priori, the ideal. And b'di'evet means post facto, means if you can't do the ideal, so at least do it in a somewhat acceptable way, in a less than ideal, but still acceptable. The sin, so in Sefer Shmot, the sin of the golden calf in Parshat Ki Tisa upset the process of revelation and progress of Jewish history to the point where the entire enterprise was in jeopardy. Much effort and space is then devoted to reestablishing the covenant with new structures and strictures in the relationship between God and the Jewish people. And so he goes on to say that the same is true with Sefer Bemidbar, that we have the ideal, the way that the camp is supposed to be set up, the way that we're supposed to travel. And then things go awry, things go wrong, and we have to set up a new reality. And that's the second part. That's the second half of Sefer Bamidbar. And Rav Lichtenstein makes the same point also in source number 10. So he says that the beginning of the Sefer sets up this sort of utopian reality, this ideal. We have all the people are counted, everything is in place. We have the tribal leaders. We know who's going to lead the people. We know how everything is going to be. We're on our way. We're going to begin marching. But in keeping with the magnitude of the expectation, so is the magnitude of the crisis and the crash at the first optical with the sin of the mitonanim, which he translates as murmurers. And the people were as murmurers, speaking evil in the ears of the Lord. From there, everything gets worse, and the people go from one sin to the next. The deterioration continues with Kivrota Ta'ava, the sin of the spies, the sin of the Ma'apilim, the sin of the Mikoshesh, Korach and his company, Riva, etc., etc. After a seemingly ideal beginning, everything collapses, and the people of Israel begin to face crisis after crisis. A long time passes before the situation is truly rectified. Even after their extended journey in the wilderness, the conquest of the land also takes longer than expected. And even after all this, the people, led by Joshua, not Moshe, fail to conquer the entire land. Problems continue during the days of the judges. After Yoshua, it takes time to reach the ideal state of affairs and build the temple. Okay, so again, we have the ideal vision of what's supposed to be, and then the rest of the Sefer, and as he says, the rest, much of Tanakh, right, all the way through Sefer Yehoshua, through Sefer Shoftim, through Sefer Shmuel, is trying to get back to that ideal state. And as we know, once we get there, it doesn't last very long either. But it's all about trying to trying to get back to that ideal, or trying to figure out what to do in the absence of that ideal. I'll pause for a moment. Any questions or comments so far?
Yes, I'd like to offer what I think is an approximation of Rob Hirsch's understanding of that.
Okay.
I've always thought it was extremely beautiful.
Okay.
As you know, the inverted nuns are sometimes considered a whole book of the Torah itself.
Right. Right.
And why would that be? And the context in which he was speaking, don't forget, is the middle of the 19th century, with all these young nationalisms coming along right and left, and now people have new reasons to fight against one another that they didn't even have before. And he I just find it a breath of fresh air for him to say, let's not concentrate so much for a moment on the people. Our history is the history of the Torah. The Torah never leaves us. Hashem has not taken it away from us.
Hmm.
It is there in every one of the situations we are in, and our challenge is to develop ourselves and that group on the basis of the Torah. And the Torah is always there for us. And what our history is the history of the journey of the Torah.
Interesting, beautiful. And that might go back to what Avi was asking at the beginning with the Ramban. The Ramban
Mhm.
saying that Sefer Bamidbar is about temporary commandments, right? And what does that mean in relationship to mitzvah that are dependent on Eretz Yisrael? And so one very beautiful common explanation is that the Torah was given in the desert, was given in a place without any boundaries, without any border, no defined setting, in order to drive home the lesson that Torah is applicable and relevant in all situations in all generations. That it's specifically not dependent on being in Israel or Poland or Belgium or wherever else you want to set up as the ideal Jewish community, Baltimore. Um, but that specifically it was given in an undefined geographic place to teach us that it's equally as relevant and binding in all situations, in all generations,
Yeah, I like that.
in all
I heard
political
that
realities.
before.
I think that dovetails very nicely. Thank you, Anne.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
okay, so I wanted to just build off of this sort of structural observation of Sefer Bamidbar with a really beautiful shir that I heard. So part also, Cheryl, back to your question about preparing the Parsha shir. So it also depends on how much car time I have leading up to it. So if there's a lot of
Mhm.
car time and a lot of time opportunity to listen to some shiurim on podcast. So then that helps shape it also. So Matan had a baseball tournament in where was he? Silver Spring. So that was a car ride down and a car ride back, and I heard this really beautiful cheer from Gila Fine, who uh, wrote a really interesting book that I hope to have some time, a bit opportunity to explore with you at some point. But she was talking on the Matan Parsha podcast, and she developed she builds on this idea in a very what I thought was a very beautiful way. She begins by mentioning what I have here in number 11, Victor Turner, um, anthropologist, sociologist, who talks about liminal phases and liminality, um, which is basically points of transition, right? And you have to sort of have a complete breakdown in crisis. Um, In liminality, the transitional state between two phases, individuals were betwixt and between. They did not belong to the society that they previously were a part of, and they were not yet reincorporated into that society. Liminality is a limbo, an ambiguous period characterized by humility, seclusion, tests, sexual ambiguity, and communitas. During liminal phases, established social classifications and cultural norms often break down, et cetera, et cetera. So that's her fancy way of introducing this idea. Um, but picking up, this is the AI generated transcript. So the words might not be perfect, but yeah, I think we'll get the general point. So she asks over here, why does everything fall apart so abruptly and so completely? How do we go in that short space between the last verse of Bamidbar 10 and the first, which are those nuns in the first verse of chapter 11? Okay. They were forced from slavery, and her answer is they were forced from slavery into freedom. You might think that that's a great change, but every change is hard. Specifically, this change we know is traumatic for the people of Israel. That's the chipazon, the haste, which yanks them out of Egypt. It might have been a horrible reality, Egypt, that is, but it was a known reality and a familiar reality, which is why you have these Israelites just yearning to go back. Not because it was better, but because it was familiar. It was obviously not better, but it's what they knew. And they're in the desert. They've managed to somehow, again, after the turbulence of the book of Shemot, they forged this order for themselves. At this point, they just want to hold on to what they have. This is the order. We've managed to create this beautiful camp, and it's all pure, and it's all harmonious, and it's all peaceful. Let's just hold on to what we have. But they can't, because that's not their destiny. They're going to have to enter the land, and the order that they have is no longer going to be relevant. So everything, the social institutions, the leadership, the morality, it all has to go. It's a story we Jews have returned to again and again and retold throughout our long history, which has been difficult and chaotic and has been so many moments of destruction. It's a story that's referred to throughout the Bible when we look at it. Well, I should say it's the story that basically recognizes that order has to die so that a new order can be reborn. Sometimes you have to have destruction to lead to redemption, that the seed of deliverance is located in the heart of darkness. And so we see that story referred to again and again in the Bible, and we speak about the dark years of Egypt, the years of enslavement and torture, which were essentially the crucible where we were forged as a people. We see this come up again and again in rabbinic literature, in the Talmud, etc., etc. What's the point that she's making? That part of the lesson of Sefer Bamidbar, and in response to the Ramban, the temporality of it, and how, right, what's the point of having a Sefer in Chumash which is only relevant for a specific time in history? So she makes the point, well, that is the journey of Jewish history. That is the point of Jewish history. That is the lesson of Jewish history. That whatever we set up for ourselves doesn't last. And we have to be able to adapt and to find a way to make things work in a new reality, in new social constructs, in new historical realities, in new political realities. And so this first half of Sefer Bamidbar sets up this ideal utopian camp where we have the Mishkan, which represents Har Sinai, right in the middle, and everyone's situated around it, and it's going to be beautiful and easy, and we're going to journey. It's going to be an easy, God's going to clear the path for us, and we're going to go into the land of Israel, we're going to conquer it, we're going to build the base of Mikdash, everything's going to be great. But that doesn't last. And we can add, there's lots of good explanations and lots of good questions we can ask. Why doesn't it last? Is it the case that it can't last, that this is inevitable? Is there ever a time when things don't have to go wrong? But the reality is that things do go wrong. The reality is that we have to be equipped to turn 180 and to adapt to new realities. And that's what she says is the basic idea and structure of Sefer Bamidbar. Is it begins with this beautifully, perfectly structured, everything is numbered, everything is counted, everything has its exact place. We think we know how the story is going to go, how it's going to end, by Hivin Sawa Aron, but those backward nuns, and then things unravel very quickly, and the rest of the Sefer is spent setting up a way to deal with the new reality in light of how things went so bad. And so when we talk, again, back to the first midrash that we saw. Sorry, this didn't make it onto the recording the first time, so let me go back and show it again. But the midrash that tells us that by studying Sefer Bamidbar, it's as if we are experiencing ki'iluhu nasa v'chana im b'nei Yisrael Bamidbar, as if we're able to journey and camp with Bnei Israel in the desert, right? So that is the lesson of Jewish history, right? Learning Sefer Bamidbar is to learn Jewish history, is to learn that need to adopt a new reality, to be able to apply and have the ability and the capacity to apply the Torah's eternal lessons in different settings, in different historical, political, social realities. That's what Sefer Bamidbar is all about. So it's a I think it's a very interesting overarching theme. As we make our way through the Sefer in the coming weeks, we can test it out and see if this holds true or not, if we agree with it. But I thought it was a really interesting way of thinking about it, and I'm thinking about what is the purpose again of the Torah telling us about all these, this reality that was only very temporary. And what are the eternal lessons that we should derive from it, that we should carry with us through the long course and journey of Jewish history, and what are those details that matter? So that's the theory that she suggests presents for what's going on in Sefer Bamidbar. Any reactions to this?
There's a mitzvah, right? That is combined together with the daily mitzvah to remember being brought out of Mitzrayim
Mm-hmm.
and Har Sinai and so on. And there's several of them there that have to do with what's in Bamidbar. But they emphasize what Hashem did in the Midbar. So there's another whole way of looking at it. What is it? I mean, we could take a look at some of those verbs there. Some of them are not the most common verbs, what it is that Hashem did with us. And certainly the story of Miriam also that is there, which is one that's good for us to remember at we're at the transition point between 2 days of the Omer and yesterday, so to speak, had to do with the Gevura of Malchus. What are the areas that one does have the permission of the community to be a ruler in which one's not, and the Gevura is knowing the point in which one should not allow things like misplaced compassion or other things to get in the way of the authority structure. And now we're in Tiferet. We are in the time of harmony beginning tonight in regard to Malchus. How can we be a people who are in harmony with one another? They're one of our crying problems. And so certainly for me anyway, going through Bamidbar again, which can be just so very difficult sometimes, it's absolutely necessary to look at it in order to help to figure out how we can solve some of these problems that we have, which are about to tear us apart.
Yeah, yeah. I have a hard time following all the Sfirot connections in Sfirot Omer, but what you said was very beautiful. Thank you.
It reminds me of the Haggadah. It says
Mm-hmm.
that we're like reliving the experience every time we have a Seder,
Exactly.
as
Yes.
if we were there.
Yeah. And so we're able to expand our imaginative existence to the desert experience as well. Yeah.
Do you think that there's a parallel to the golden calf? The idea of something going wrong at the moment when
So I'm not sure if you were with us when we looked at the source from Rabbi Helfgott, where he makes that very
sorry.
point. It's um, source number 7. No,
I
not
will
number
go back and
7.
read it.
Sorry, not number
Thank you.
7. The second quote from him, number 9, where he says that yes, in the same way that Sefer Shmot sort of has the ideal that gets interrupted by the major, the catastrophic moment of the sin of the golden calf, and then gives us, right, at least in one theory, the Mishkan as a way to repair the relationship with God. So he says, but Midbar is the same thing in that we have the ideal, what's supposed to be, and then we have the breakdown, whatever the key sin is, right, with the mitonanim, whichever one it is, but then we have to rebuild on that to try to return to that ideal. So yes, so I think it's there. So and so does Rabbi Helfgott.
All right. I'm
Yeah,
sorry I said
not a problem. Okay, so I just wanted to end with the conclusion of what Gila Fine said in this podcast. Um, she says, "I'm not a commentator on current affairs. I'm a literature person. You're right. The story is always neater when it's folded between two covers of a book. The great chesed that we have today, that the Israelites in Bamidbar didn't have, is we have their story neatly presented to us between two covers of a book. So how do we rebuild? That is a question that, again, the AI doesn't, and the audio, but it's not a question that I have to tackle. There are more experienced people than I think have to tackle. But what I can do, as somebody who deals in stories, is to say we've been here before. So I thought that again, just as far as a takeaway lesson, and in light of all that we're going through right now with the war in Israel, I think it speaks very powerfully to having to be able to adopt and adapt to new and changing realities, and still find the eternal message and way to make things meaningful and relevant. So I made an announcement at the beginning, but there's a few more people here now. Next Tuesday night will be the conclusion of Shavuos. So we're not going to meet on Zoom, but we will have a Parsha Shir in Shul in between Mincha and Ma'ariv. So everyone is certainly welcome to join us in Shul. I think around 8:10 will be Mincha, maybe 8:15. And then we'll have an in-person Parsha Shir looking at Parshat Naso next week, and hope everyone can join us. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and hopefully see you in Shul on Shabbos.
Very good. Thank you, Rabbi.
Oh, thank you so much, Rabbi.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Good night.